Hey, Larken Rose here. Before I continue, I wanted to mention that on June 3rd, which is a Saturday, somewhere in the Phoenix area, there will be a private screening of the Jones Plantation movie. Yeehaw. So stay tuned and I'll get more specifics out. But just warning you ahead of time that that is about to be happening in Phoenix, June 3rd. So, whether you're Democrat or Republican or some other flavor of political bent, you probably get frustrated from time to time that government isn't really doing what you want and does a bad job, and you vote for one side or the other, but even then you're frustrated and they're not really delivering on what you had hoped. Maybe you wanted to get more funding for your local school. Maybe you wanted them to outlaw or crack down on drugs. Maybe you're okay with marijuana, but maybe you want them to crack down on like cocaine and harder drugs like that. Maybe you want a gun ban. You want an assault weapons ban. You want them making that illegal and bringing that to an end. Maybe you see the problems in big cities, and if you're politically left, maybe you think the solution is welfare and like a universal basic income or free healthcare or whatever. If you're politically right, maybe you think the solution to that is more police and so on and so forth. Well, whatever you want government to do, you may very well not be getting what you're asking for. And I have a solution for you that will be more direct, more reliable, and more moral, and skips the entire silly process of begging and petitioning and voting. Whatever you want government to do, I suggest that instead of waiting around for politicians to do it yourself. Take a gun and do it yourself. For example, if you want more funding for your local schools, well, you know that where that comes from is the property taxes of your neighbors, right? Well, you could either wait around or vote or play the political game and see what happens, or you could just take a gun, go door to door to your neighbor's house and do what you were going to ask government to do for you, which is demand money from your neighbors under threat of force, and go and take a pile of money that you took by force, go take that to the schools and just donate it. It's a lot faster, it's a lot more efficient, it's a lot more honest than you voting to have a committee do a thing and raise property taxes and go through all that rigmarole. And it's the same thing, it's what you wanted anyway, so why don't you just do it yourself? And if you wanted to outlaw marijuana or maybe just cocaine or whatever drugs you want outlawed, then instead of petitioning and whining and seeing what you can get done, take a gun, go find people with habits you don't approve of, point the gun in their face, drag them off and put them in a cage. Do it yourself. That's how to get things done, right? Do it yourself. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Why are you waiting around asking government to violently assault these people for having the habit that you don't approve of? Do it yourself. You can get a gun. It's pretty easy. You might have to be sort of sneaky and try not to get shot, but at least that would be more direct and more honest. Or if you want a gun ban, if you think assault weapons need to be outlawed, well, instead of whining and petitioning and going through that, why don't you just take a gun and do exactly what you wanted government to do for you, which is go door to door, threaten with bodily harm or death anybody who happens to own an assault weapon or whatever it is that you want banned, and demand that they give it up. And if they don't, either kill them or drag them off and put them in a cage, because that's what you wanted to have government do anyway. So why don't you just do it yourself? It's a lot easier. It's a lot more reliable than voting and trying to pass this or that legislation. Just be honest and go do it yourself. And if you're worried about the problems in the inner cities and stuff, whether you're pushing for universal basic income and welfare programs, or whether you're pushing for more police, either way, those are funded by government through taxation, which is demanding money from a bunch of people without their consent and then hurting them if they don't pay up. First you harass and send nasty notes and demand more, and then maybe you'll seize their house, and eventually if they don't comply, you'll lock them up. And if they don't comply with that, you shoot them. Taxation is a threat. It's a demand for money backed by a threat of violence. So why wait around for government to do it? If that's the sort of thing you believe in, if that's the sort of thing you advocate, do it yourself. Why aren't you? Now, there's two reasons. One, you might be a coward because you might know that your victims may fight back. They may resist your insane thuggery, and so you'd much rather have thugs of the state doing it because then you're not in danger. You just went and voted and petitioned and whined, and then you're nowhere near when they're doing armed raids on people's houses for not having the right habit or owning the wrong piece of metal. You're nowhere near, so there's no threat to you. But I suspect the other reason is actually the bigger one. Yeah, you're a coward because you're not doing it yourself, but you're also an absolute hypocrite. Because I bet not only would you be scared to do that stuff, robbing your neighbors at gunpoint to fund whatever you think the solution is, robbing your neighbors to fund your child's education, trying to violently control what pieces of hardware or substances your neighbors have. I don't just think that you're scared to do that on your own because of what might happen to you. I think you know damn well that would be immoral and insane if you did it yourself. And your belief in government and politics and law has convinced you that asking somebody else by way of politics, by way of voting, by way of legislation, that completely changes the morality of it. You recognize that it would be insane and evil for you to go door to door with a gun, threatening people if they don't have the habits you approve of. But for some reason, you think that asking government to do exactly the same thing is somehow moral. Because, well, that's the system we have. Which, by the way, doesn't mean anything. It's just saying that's what is. If you complain at a murderer and say, stop murdering people, why are you doing that? Oh, that's what I do. That's the same argument as you saying, that's the system we have. You advocate violent aggression against your neighbors by way of government because that's the system we have. In other words, you advocate evil because you advocate evil. And other people advocate evil too, so I guess that makes it okay. If you wouldn't do it yourself, why on earth do you think it's okay to pay somebody else to do it or to vote for somebody else to do it? And I'm talking to absolutely everybody who believes in government, because absolutely everybody who believes in government is voting for them to do things that you know damn well you would have no right to do yourself. That's why I can offer you a gun and say, go do it yourself, and you won't. Because not only are you a coward, you're also a complete freaking hypocrite. You're advocating violent aggression while pretending you're not. You feel no guilt of trying to get other people to do things you know damn well would be wrong if you did them. Because, that is democracy and representative government and legislature, and that's the system we have. And all this fluff you've been taught to believe and regurgitate to make you feel okay about personally condoning violent aggression against other people. Now, I own this. Why do I have a gun? Because on rare occasions, it's actually morally justified to use force, including deadly force, against another human being. And that is to defend against aggressors, not to control my neighbor's habits, not to make them pay for whatever I think might be important or helpful, but to defend against aggressors and thieves and thugs. Now, I don't have to be hypocritical at all, Because I wouldn't pay for somebody or I wouldn't vote for somebody to do something if I wouldn't feel justified in doing it myself. I would feel absolutely justified in defending myself or anybody else using physical deadly force if an innocent person's life were on the line. I would do it myself, so it's perfectly consistent for me to ask somebody else to do it for me or with me or pay somebody else to help me out and do that. But I would be responsible for what I do because that's being a grown-up. I'm not imagining that, well, if I vote for somebody else to do it, no responsibilities on me. They did it. I just hid in a booth and pressed a button every few years. Now, there's one final group of people who believe in government who may say, oh, well, I only want government to do those inherently moral things by force, like protecting other people. So it's justified. No, you don't. Because if you only advocated that, it wouldn't be government. It would just be some people. Because if there are people out there using force to defend the innocent, they're not taxing anybody because that's aggression. That's not defending the innocent. That's armed robbery. That's mass extortion. And being an extortionist and then protecting people from other extortionists doesn't make you the good guy. It just makes you an even bigger hypocrite. And if you imagine that you advocate only a defensive government that only does what we as mere mortals have the moral right to do anyway, like defend ourselves and others from aggressors, then you haven't looked closely at the belief in government. Because the only thing that describes is either some buddies helping each other out and helping protect each other and defend each other in a crisis, or hired protection of people who are still just people. They don't have a monopoly. They don't make law. They don't have a jurisdiction. They don't magically have this line where within this, we're the only ones allowed to do this. And they don't have any special rights. Badges and uniforms don't magically alter morality. They're just people. To advocate government of any kind is to advocate violent aggression. And here's where I'll be nice. So maybe I sounded like I was a little bit harsh and judgmental, which I was on purpose. Here's where I'm going to be nice to you, whether you're Democrat or Republican or anywhere else on the political spectrum. I don't think you intended to advocate evil. I don't think you even recognize that what you were doing is advocating violent aggression against all of your neighbors. That is what you were doing, but I don't think you saw it like that. Because a massive amount of time and effort, propaganda and indoctrination is put in to the effort to make you not recognize what it is that you're advocating. When you vote, when you petition for this or that legislation, when you play the game of politics, you are personally advocating violent aggression against all your neighbors and millions of people you don't know. But they go to great lengths to make you not recognize that. So, all I'm asking of you is two things. Admit what it is that you personally advocate happening when you vote by way of politics, whatever you believe in. Admit what it is that you condone and do it yourself. And if you can't do that, why not? Now, I remember many, many years ago when I believed in government. I believed in a small, conservative, constitutional type government. And it took me a while to recognize that, yeah, but even that requires immorally robbing people to pay for the version that I thought was going to be legitimate in the name of protecting them, which I'm embarrassed by how long it took me to realize how insane that is. I want all of you violently robbed so you can be protected. Literally, that's what conservatives believe. It's what I believed when I was a statist. And Democrats or Republicans, they just have different versions of what they want the mass extortion to fund and what they want the violence of government used to control and to force people to do and to prohibit people from doing. But all of them are using this monster called politics and law and authority and government to try to violently dominate people who haven't threatened or harmed anybody. That's not okay. It's not okay if you do it yourself. It's not okay if you ask somebody else to do it. It's not okay if you vote for somebody else to do it. So I really want you to look at the reality of what it is you are asking government to do for you when you vote, when you petition, even when you just support them with words. I support a policy where we keep our borders, blah, blah, blah. Would you do it yourself? Would you feel morally justified doing it yourself? Because if not, if without any law, without any badge, without any uniform, you would feel bad about doing it yourself, you shouldn't be asking anybody else to do it for you. I don't know how simple a concept can get. That is as basic as it gets. And nobody who believes in government abides by that. If there's something you shouldn't do yourself, don't vote for somebody else to do it for you. When you grasp the simplicity, the beauty, the truth of that one statement, you will automatically give up your belief in politics and government and authority and become an anarchist.